Welcome back to the Knife Studio. In this video, we've got a little more work to do on the guard and this little spacer, and then we can move on to fitting the carbon fiber handle. I've never done a hidden tang carbon fiber handle before, so we're gonna figure out how hard it is to do right here, right now.
Front spacer. This is a chunk of 416 stainless, forged out from a leftover project. I think it was something I cut too short. So I'm going to start by making the front spacer about the same width as the guard, even though it'll be a little more narrow when it's finished. Go chop this off, start milling it down, get a slot, fit it up to the blade. I'm going to clean up the sides of this just a little bit so I can chuck it up in the milling machine vise a little easier. Looks like on my sketch I drew a front spacer that's about 1/4 inch thick. I'm okay with it being a little thicker. So right now this is about 325 thousandths. I'll probably mill it down to around 290, 270, somewhere in there. Right here is where the guard ends. And the front spacer needs to fit all the way up to there. Get a center line on here. I'll use this template as a rough layout guide. Just center it with the lines. Come in here with a little Sharpie. Again, it just needs to be rough. We'll fine tune it with files. Well, I don't know how it happened, but somehow I broke this brand new milling bit. Just lightly milling on some stainless steel. Like really lightly milling on some stainless. All 4 corners of it are broken off. Like major broken. I've never seen this happen before. And this is the extra fancy one with the super tough coating or whatever. Like it's destroyed. Yeah, the speed's really important. Like if I could have done it, I would have turned the speed all the way up. Really need variable speed milling machine. It's probably more important than a variable speed grinder. YouTube people, yes, I do realize the speed should have been a lot higher. But it is a pain to change the speed on this grinder, milling machine rather. You have to go in here and do some nasty stuff to get the belts changed. And all this stuff is sharp. Need to change this to a variable frequency drive motor and have variable speed, or just upgrade the whole milling machine someday, possibly. I normally like to go until I ruin something. The reason for that is normally something seems to be at its very best right before you destroy it. I kind of mean that as a figurative thing, but it seems like in knife making, it actually holds true sometimes. Take feather pattern Damascus, for example. The prettiest feather pattern Damascus I've ever made. Always was at some stage where I thought it was completely destroyed and it was just really ugly and nasty. Sometimes it's got to go through that really ugly, nasty stage where it's almost destroyed to make it through and become beautiful. And other times it actually gets destroyed and you have to start over or figure another way around it. Philosophy of knife making and life with Kyle Royer. And that, my friends, is a front spacer that fits up nice and snug. That's nice. Alright guys, this is a real treasure. I've had this piece of carbon fiber for a number of years. This one comes from some kind of aircraft strut, and it's super high quality, but it's also really coarse. By high quality, I mean it's really dense. A lot of carbon fiber you see out there has little pits and holes and stuff in it in between the layers, but this one's super solid. I guess first things first, should cut it down to the right length and then maybe square the ends off. I think I like the length of this handle I drew on here, so I'm just gonna go with that for now. I'll leave it a little extra long in case we run into trouble. Leave it maybe even like 3/16 of an inch long. Gold plated square. Got to be gold plated or it won't be as square as it would be without gold plating. I know carbon fiber is going to be really tough on drill bits and sanding belts and stuff. So you want to use really nice sharp sanding belts. I've done one other knife with carbon fiber handle, and it was a full tang with carbon fiber scales. Definitely going to want really good ventilation for this too. And when I get to doing heavy stuff, I'll definitely be wearing a respirator as well. But for this light stuff, I'm just going to use the vent we got going on right here. I'm going to mount this up in here, and I will be wearing a respirator while I'm drilling in this because there's going to be lots of fine dust, so we don't want to breathe this stuff.
The next day.
The reason I'm wearing rubber gloves while I'm working with this carbon fiber is because the day before I didn't have any on, and I got all these little micro splinters in between my fingers, and it was super annoying. So I'm going to try to avoid that while I'm doing heavy shaping from now on with the carbon fiber. I finally got this block of carbon fiber fit to our blade. It was a pain. I've only worked with carbon fiber on one other knife, and it was scales, so I didn't have to make a slot going all the way through it. I'll tell you, drilling it wasn't a problem. It kind of abrades the drill bit and dulls it pretty quickly, but it was not a problem at all. But you know how I normally use the side of the drill bit to kind of wallow the hole out and make a slot and kind of widen it out? That is where the drill bit does not do carbon fiber very well at all. And the broach I was using to try to scrape away the inside wasn't cutting it. It was just kind of skating off the surface. So it took me about 4 or 5 times longer to fit this handle. I got it there, it fits nice and snug, and there's not much play in it at all. So we're ready to move on to working on the pommel. So I'm gonna use 416 stainless that we forged out previously for the pommel. And it's gonna have one of those blued steel balls on the end of it as well to go with the theme of our guard. Let's go chuck this bad boy up in the lathe. Once again, I've got my tooling chucked up on the back side of the workpiece, and that's just to help it get out of the way of the camera and everything, because that tooling kind of sticks up in the way if I have it on the front and makes it so we can't see what I'm doing. I turn a good portion of the piece down to about a 1/2 inch diameter, and that way I can have a nice, smaller diameter round cylinder to hold on to when I flip it around the other way, and we can start working on the actual pommel. So this pommel at its thickest point is going to be a little under 1 inch wide. I'm trying to make this stiletto have a nice, delicate feel to it, so I'm trying to keep everything from getting too big on me. A lot of my knives have a tendency of being real big and beefy and everything, but I'm trying to go a little more of a delicate look on this. Go ahead and get a hole drilled all the way through the main portion of the pommel, and that's where our tang will go through at a later point. At this stage, I'm drilling it for a 1032 thread, but later on I decide to go ahead and not have the pommel threaded at all and have the tang just go all the way through the pommel and thread to the ball on the end. But like I said, at this stage I didn't realize I was doing that yet. Now we can really start bringing the pommel to life and giving it some shape. With my manual lathe, I can only go in one direction at a time, accurately, but since I want this nice smooth curve, I'm just kind of eyeballing it and running both knobs at the same time. I like to call it etch-a-sketching it. Because with an etch-a-sketch, if you want to make any line that's not on a 90-degree angle to another line,
You always have to run both knobs at the same time and try to get that curve or that 45-degree angle you like. I use a cutter to mark off where I want the base of the pommel to start. And then I'm using a large drill bit to go ahead and remove some of the excess material inside where the ball is going to kind of rest in the pommel. Once I get the bulk of the material removed with the drill bit, I can go in with a boring tool and clean it out more. I want that ball to sit in there nice and deep. The ball you see me using right now is just a ball bearing. Later on, I'm going to make a custom ball from mild steel. I want some decorative grooves at the base of the pommel. So I removed the bulk of the material with the die grinder and I cleaned it up with an 1/8 inch chainsaw file. I want it to match the theme of what we have going on the guard. It's a little different, but it still looks like it's from the same family of shapes. And that's a broken file. So if you're using a file like this on the lathe and you put it on a little bit of an angle to the side, it can get caught. And chances are, if it's a small file like this, it's gonna break off and it might even throw a piece at you. So that gets me shaken up every time that happens. This is the mild steel ball that I've made from scratch. And I'm drilling some holes in it right now because I need to thread it for an 832 thread. It's gonna thread right onto the end of the tang and hold the handle assembly together. All that goop you see on it is super glue. I've just got the ball super glued to a little spigot sticking out of the chuck of the lathe. Use a little heat and break it free from the super glue bond.
So I'm working on this large ball that goes into the pommel, and using this cutter like I did for our small balls on the guard isn't gonna work because my lathe just can't handle a large version of this. So I was looking around for creative ways to make a ball on the lathe, and I actually found a guy making a wooden ball on a wood lathe, and I took some of his techniques and I'm applying it to this on the metal lathe, and it's actually working out really nicely.
So what I have here is scroll chuck with piece of wood chucked up into it and a recess in here.
So I've got just a spigot in here that has a little dished out area, and then this just has a hole going through it. Then you can take it and tighten it up on here, kind of lightly move the piece around just to get it to seat properly. And then you're ready to go, and you can take a file or a mill cutter or whatever you want and surface this, or a lathe cutter rather. And then to get it round, you just move it to a different position. I roughed it out on the lathe before doing this. I got it really close to being a ball, and then I just keep turning it a little bit and then going over it with a file, and it's plus or minus like 2 or 3 thousandths of an inch from being round in every direction. Really, really cool. It doesn't need to be perfectly round. I just needed it close enough to where your eye couldn't tell that it's got flat spots or anything in it. And it's definitely within there. I've got a hole here because this is gonna get tapped and threaded for an 832 thread, and it'll thread right onto our tang. I'm gonna start polishing this ball and using this really cool way to hold it and keep moving it around and try to get this thing polished up really nicely. I've got some lineup pins in the front spacer that match up with the carbon fiber. That way our part goes back in the same place every time.
Here's the pommel. It goes all the way through, and then the blued steel ball, it will be blued, that threads onto the end of the tang. You can cinch it all down nice and tight.
The pommel's pretty much finished. It's as far as I'm gonna take it right now. All we have left to do is a little bit of fine grit sanding, and then buff it, and then blue the ball on the end, later towards the end of the project. I've started shaping the front spacer, and I'm gonna continue to do that in the next video. We're gonna get the front spacer shaped down the rest of the way, and then move on to shaping down the carbon fiber handle, and hopefully start doing some layout and get into fluting the carbon fiber too. We're gonna have flutes going around the carbon fiber handle with twisted 24 karat gold wire down at the bottom of the flutes. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.
Hey, here's my inspiration for this knife.
Light bulb.
Oh look, does that look similar?
You found your inspiration,
Oh, it's the same shape, right there.
pretty much. Should make a knife with stuff like that around the shop.
Oh, I wonder if this caught that.